Dude, I'm not having this conversation with you again. All right, then. Guess you admit I'm right. A hot dog is not a sandwich. I'm telling you, meat between two pieces of bread, that's a sandwich. You act like words have some sort of objective definition when in reality words just mean whatever the society needs them to mean. They change over time. They become different things. We make up new words. We get rid of old words. You're just doing this out of some weird sort of inferiority, superiority complex thing. Yeah, well, your face is a sandwich. I hate to break it to you, but we humans are not always rational about how we form our beliefs. If we were, you'd expect the only barrier to agreement would be information availability. As more people gain access to more information, you'd expect to see broad agreement across beliefs. In fact, you could say that this was one of the implicit promises of the internet. Virtually all of our collected human knowledge in science, history, philosophy, and current events can be accessed from a device right in your pocket. And yet, across the world, we're seeing sharper, more intense divides along cultural, religious, political, and economic lines. In fact, not only has the internet failed to bring us together, it seems to be the thing that's driving us apart. We all know the keywords that have popped up across the political spectrum.
Disinformation and misinformation and fake news.
Fake news.
Disinformation.
Misinformation.
Can you figure out which is the fake news?
So what do? The internet genie isn't going back in the bottle, and nor do I think it should. Despite the glaring problems it facilitates, information access is a good thing. Also, it's dangerous to expect some sort of top-down truth enforcement, either from our governments or from the companies that run our social media. And yet, we're still faced with the same problem that for years we've been locked in our respective echo chambers, shouting our versions of the truth at each other across the divide, convinced that if we just shout a little bit louder, the other side will see the light. But that hasn't worked. And it ain't gonna. Why? Because the problem isn't just bad information or even disagreement itself for that matter. The problem is that, well, yes, and I do mean you specifically, and also myself and everyone else for that matter. But I want to preempt that impulse to immediately start pointing the finger at everyone that we disagree with. In fact, I'd wager that the more confident you are in your positions on controversial topics, the bigger of an idiot you're likely to be. That big, mushy, beautiful brain of yours is really great for lots of things. Unfortunately, forming accurate beliefs about abstract and emotionally charged subjects is not one of them. However, no need to fret. I've decided to save the world. You see, I believe that we can become less dumb, but to get there, we need to cultivate certain personality traits within ourselves. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with the concept of knowledge. Back before the 20th century, epistemologists were pretty well in agreement that knowledge could be defined as a justified true belief. Then in the 60s, this guy named Edmund Gettier came along and identified a couple of cases where a belief could count as justified and true, but not intuitively feel like knowledge. For the next 30 years, epistemologists spent most of their time coming up with new definitions of knowledge that also didn't work. Then in the 90s, this philosopher named Linda T. Zagzebski came along and said, hey, maybe this is all a big waste of time. She started a subfield of epistemology called virtue epistemology that said, hey, maybe knowledge has more to do with the believer than aspects of the belief themselves. There are certain personality traits that make one more likely to form accurate beliefs. We'll call these epistemic virtues, and they include things that I'm sure you're familiar with, like intellectual humility, intellectual bravery, and critical thinking skills. By contrast, epistemic vices make one less likely to form accurate beliefs, and they include things like intellectual laziness or intellectual hubris. Long story short, I believe that saving the world involves creating a culture of epistemic virtue. That's the goal of the Blankish Slate Project. In the 17th century, philosopher John Locke argued that we're all born as blank slates, his famous tabula rasa. All of our beliefs and personality traits are built up on that blank slate through our experiences. And while we now know that this picture is a bit simplistic, I really like the idea of sort of picking apart our beliefs and rebuilding them from the ground up. I believe we tend to build up our beliefs sort of haphazardly over the course of our lives, and we wind up entrenched in these unjustified positions, and we identify with them. And so while I recognize that we can never be truly objective or really separate ourselves from our existing belief structure, I'd like for this project to adopt a spirit of blankishness. Let's try to view the world through fresh eyes and reconstruct our beliefs from the ground up, but on a more solid foundation. In the first part of the project, I hope to instill some intellectual humility by discussing all the ways that we can be wrong about things, from cognitive biases to perceptual illusions to logical fallacies. I want you to doubt yourself as much as I doubt myself every single day. Just look at yourself. Do you even exist? In the second part, we'll focus on rebuilding up your intellectual confidence by focusing on the ways that we can form accurate beliefs. Then finally, in the third part, we'll focus on applying what we've learned to evaluating all sorts of information, from news to science to history. The problem is, as I mentioned, I'm also an idiot. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And so I want this to be a collaborative project. After all, I'd be a big ol' hypocrite if I wasn't open to criticism and feedback. To that end, I hope you'll join the subreddit, where I plan on actively engaging with the community that doesn't actually exist yet, but I hope it will soon. And I'm hoping that we can tackle some of these hard problems together. Also, if you find my majestic beard too distracting, I'm creating these posts in a written form as well. You can find those in my Substack, which is also linked below. Down there. So I hope you'll stick around, like and subscribe and all that jazz. Maybe comment down below or over on the subreddit about some dumb belief you used to have that you've since overcome, and what was your process like for changing your belief. Thanks for watching, and here's to being less of an idiot, one step at a time.